One of the policies under discussion here at the General Assembly this off session is inmate labor and how to best use it to serve some public sector good for state taxpayers. Some recent budget cuts at the first part of this decade eliminated some community work projects, but now conservative lawmakers say it may be time to revisit the defunding of those work crews. Until last decade, state prison inmates could be used for small-scale city government projects, with the state covering the entire cost of that labor. But in 2010, the state defunded that program, instead offering inmate crews if local governments would pay for it. And local governments didn't take the offer. Now, some lawmakers believe this program should be reconsidered for some state funding. But is it worth it?
Good question. They've got used to it being free over the years. And everybody, if something's free, people want to keep it free. But I think if they understand it, they could have been here today to hear this presentation. They'd understand they need to put something in the game. But it was free for so long. I mean, and we've had good use of inmate labor over the years.
State prison officials confirmed to lawmakers that inmate labor is very cost effective, but it's more inefficient than hiring contract workers who do cost more. Lawmakers wonder, with that in mind, would city governments work a deal that would reduce the state's burden while saving city government dollars for some projects?
And I think it's something to look at in the future, but also I think there's going to have to be a partnership between local government and state as far as expanding these services, or at least restoring parts of them.
Representative Garland Pierce of Scotland County says inmate labor is valued in economically challenged rural North Carolina.
Well, the towns that I represent in my district, which is Scotland, Hope, Robertson, Richmond, the city governments are always on me asking what happened, can you change it? I don't have the power to change it, but it's very important to those small towns, as the representative talked about, where they were used to that type of labor. Some of our small towns only have 2 or 3 people who work in maintenance, so and you got the major highways run through there, so there was a great help to a lot of that particular part of the state.
Lincoln County Representative Jason Sain was sitting in on the emergency management oversight hearing, and inmate labor comes up, and you know, in the 90s, I thought conservative Republicans wanted to, throw away the key and lock everybody up. Now it seems like it's a good deal to have inmates working, if they can do it safely.
If they can do it safely and be cost effective. You know, we've got to look at what the costs really are and the processes. It was brought up in the committee whether or not we could invoice counties where they could pay for some of the services that we could provide. I think that's an interesting concept. But following the money, making sure that we cover those costs. But, people in their mind, they go back to the golden days where they saw inmate working crews all up and down the highways and asked that question. There's a safety concern, obviously, but with offenders who have not committed heinous crimes, it could be a labor source for us that we could utilize in emergencies, but also in road cleanup. We already do some of that, but we could do more.
I was thinking, you do see inmates working on the roadside and helping out with crews, but this is a separate crew, a community-based crew that could go out and do jobs other than picking up litter, working on the roads. Is that right?
That's right. We could do a whole host of things where we could utilize and save cost. We contract out a good bit, and we certainly don't want to short the private sector and things that they're very efficient at, but we also need to be efficient with our use of personnel. I mean, essentially, they've got a debt to the state to pay, and this is a great way for them to pay that off.
Now, this is a very broad discussion that you had with your legislators in that committee, but how do you weigh that balance of private sector and competing with 70 cents a day labor, which would be impossible to match?
Well, it would be impossible to match, and that's why I said we got to look at the total cost, because we're going to have cost involved with employees, transportation, and everything else. So everything is not as it might seem on the face. There might be a lot more cost involved. So I think the committee's right in at least studying it instead of just going full on ahead and say, oh, we're going to do this. I think we need to weigh all that out, but also we need to make sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck, I guess, is the bottom line.
What are the politics behind this as you see it working forward? Representative Jamie Bowles, when I interviewed in the story, said, we're not going to do anything short session. I almost bet you it's going to be too short. But the long view is, let's look at restoring funding, because the hatchet took care of community work crews budget-wise.
Right, it did. And I think part of that, as we heard in the committee, that counties weren't necessarily paying into it as well. The state was shouldering all of the costs. There might be a way to share that. And I think it's a long look at this would give us time to interact with our counterparts at the county level, city level, see what they're thinking. Is it something they're even willing to pay for, or at least share in the cost? So if we can do that and we get a good feeling and a good sense of it, good data, we can then move forward.
How do you weigh that local government, state? It's all taxpayers are funding both enterprises. So how do you pit local versus state, and whether locals want to do anything at all?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, you've got to find out.
Yeah.
I mean, you really, and some may want to, some may not. You've got to understand that no one wants to cut out of their pie, right? So they're working within their budget. We try to work within ours. If there's like I say, a great way to share those costs, that might be the compromise and the benefit to both. You pay some, we pay some. We're all a little bit happier because of it, and hopefully a lot more efficient.
Where do you see the crews going? Say you can work something up, maybe in the long session, as this a deal kind of works its way through. Do we need to go watch Cool Hand Luke to see what was happening when they're in the ditches chopping, or is this more about paint jobs and repair work and plumbing or mowing grass? How do you envision this playing out?
You know, I think that's it. I think it's wide open. I don't necessarily have an end game until we see what the possibilities might be. We've got to look at, most think of road crews and picking up trash. But there could be community projects that we're not, that are there, maybe it's, if we're looking at urban areas, inner city, maybe it's removal of graffiti. Maybe it's, painting the sides of buildings that need graffiti removed. I mean, it could be a whole host of things. Plumbing, I don't know. I mean, we get into some other regulatory issues.
I was going to say, that's a license job. I heard
Right.
what I'm saying with that. Now, on the safety security side of it, of course, you're worried about the people out there who are the free people working around inmates, but how much do you worry about the inmate and their security and their safety and where you're putting them?
Well, that's the other issue we have to look at. I mean, I don't like to walk alongside of highway because cars are going very fast. So when we think about cars going by as crews are cleaning up, we've got to look at that. We've got to consider that. But at any, whether we're putting them on a ladder, same concerns you'd have with any employee. I mean, there's certainly, we want to provide for their safety. And that's where I say that we've got to look at what the overall cost would be, because maybe the private sector actually is doing it a lot more efficiently and cost effective than we can do ourselves. So we've got folks out in the community. We want to get the best of everybody involved and not harm.
Yeah, an idea, I guess, born and I guess conjured here in the winter of 2014. We'll see how it plays out. Of course, you'll be around. You're always here. We'll have you on if this idea matures further. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate it.